We became partners in 1985 and immediately plunged into 10 dozen projects. And at the time, I was already collecting interviews with women at various peace camps since 1983. So when Marilyn and I began doing video together, we embarked on a project to record civil disobedience actions up at Seneca, the women's encampment. So that resulted in the video documentary CD, The Ritual of Civil Disobedience. I'm Sorrel Hayes, the partner of Marilyn Ries. I'm a composer and video film maker occasionally. And so out of all of these documents, the interviews that resulted in radio programs and a play, Disarming the World, Pulling Its Leg, that was for public radio, and CD, The Ritual of Civil Disobedience. For a long time, we were up and down the state, either working with women or interviewing.
Doing interviews, yeah.
And down here in the city at the marches, the various marches that happened in those years. Those were powerfully active years of women's
visibility,
anti-war, anti-violence. I'd rather say just pro-peace. And coming, so many women who had come out of the Vietnam War protests already had some good tactics in hand. But I think women, we invented some of the most powerful nonviolent tactics that have ever been used. And a lot of that history of women who were willing to go to jail in these nonviolent actions is still relatively unknown. So what you're doing in gathering all these documents that we and other people have collected is so important, because generations, just one generation behind us, didn't know. The conventional media didn't print the news about it, and a lot of us have been too poor to widely distribute. And now, of course, with the web and the blogs, and oh boy, do we have the tools, if we just have a little energy to do it.
Yeah, it's very different. The means out there to get information on. When I think of the marches, it took so long to get information back to women in Michigan or women in California, but now it's instantaneous and with pictures that everybody can take. And but yet the energy isn't there.
Well, the focus is different.
It's different. The attitudes are different. I think so many people are worried about focusing on attitudes, bisexual, trisexual, transsexual, that they seem to be going round and round within this much, much smaller area. And issues like women and pro-peace are humongous, but I don't see them being dealt with the same energy and the same combined unity that they were before.
What I had been doing was collecting audio. Since I'm a composer, I had my little Walkman, and or whatever was before the Walkman, interviewing women. And since I was touring as a pianist at the time a lot in Europe, I found a number of women much more active politically there than were in New York at the time. This was the late 70s. And so when I came back to New York from these trips to Europe, I began looking for the other women who were doing similar things. And that's when I heard about the Seneca Peace Camp. So I took my Walkman and I went to Seneca with a few friends, and I actually made a piece right before the Peace Encampment opened, called Celebration of No, which was no in 21 languages. And it was very much a composition of the times. I did it at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. I did it all over the place with live performers shouting no, and we made actually quite a few enemies with that piece.
We all laughed merrily.
Both men and women. It wound up being on Folkways Records, the Smithsonian Folkways. It was my first effort to use a more art composition, since that's my background, as a political gesture, and it actually worked. It offended some women up in Albany when we did it up there. They said, "This is a very negative piece," and I said, "Oh no, no is the most positive word you can use." And I don't think that got through, but to each her own. And the men, many of the men thought it was very hectoring or belligerent, but actually it was just a statement of fact. It was a nonviolent way to say, this is not the way we want the world to work. So that was my first statement, Celebration of No. And so after that, I started getting document, because I felt one of the strongest things we could do was know what each other were doing in different countries. And at that time, Greenham Common was the biggest, best known women's nonviolent protest. And I went there with a filmmaker, Lily Green, and we got a helper from London, and we went for 3 days to Greenham Common, and oh, was it a shocker. I had no idea how disturbed the American military was by these women, nor had I any idea till I saw it what these women were going through to camp around the perimeter of the base. And though I wasn't arrested myself, I talked with women who were, and we were rousted. Our camping ground was rousted by the local police, and somebody put oil in the water tanks. And then I saw the military truck draw up on the other side of the gate where we were gathered, with a huge radar cup. I mean, enormous, what is it called, screen, set dish,
yeah.
The big dish. And women had been telling me about the illnesses they were getting from radar being beamed towards them. And then I don't know how much has been talked about that, but indeed the military was using heavy radar to
discourage.
Yeah, discourage, and it actually made women ill for years. We now know, of course, the radar does terrible things. These satellite dishes all over, but when you really focus, and these older dishes, and the military dishes, really made women quite ill. So
and they were so close to the people they were beaming at. It's not like these dishes that are at least 80 feet.
Right, they're much stronger too.
And they're much smaller.
And I saw the courage of the women. So when I came back to this country and went up to Seneca, I saw the beginnings of what was another kind of Greenham, our version of Greenham. And for years, I have such deep admiration for the women who went to jail, stayed in jail, came back again, got arrested again, went to jail, and if, to say the least, indignity, but then sometimes actual physical harm, and gave a good portion of their lives in those years to make our point. Marvelous years for us, and it's inspired me, looking through all the tapes now, to see what my sisters did. So we went back up, it must have been 86 or 87 with a crew, August, for Hiroshima Day, and filmed. And I guess 83 to 86 or 7 was the most visited time, most visited years for the peace camp. And we have not been back to the land since then, but have, heard from you and other women about its history since then.
Afterwards we did the cassette, Peace Camp Sing.
Well, I had all this material on cassette, and then we wanted to enlarge it. It's what wonderful treasures of song from the peace encampments and the marches and chants and logos. And so then we wanted more studio sound, and you all came
and sat
here in the living
Sorrel
room
studio. Yeah,
in the living room studio, and we recorded, and the result was Peace Camp Sing.
I don't know that we felt at this time that we should make a thing of it, a cassette of it. But I think when we heard it, we decided, it turned out so well, we decided it should be available. And then it was great. It was picked up by Lady Slipper and offered.
Putting out Peace Camp Sing was a way of preserving some of the document, and then I think there was nothing else quite like it either for women to have as a musical inspiration.
We sent a whole bunch of cassettes directly to the camp to sell.
Yeah, we did.
Yes.
So it's not that a portion went. We sent material for them to sell, and
Yes.
But we have masters. We've discovered some masters, and we're taking those masters south, and then Marilyn will. One of them's in a digital format. I found it in the old PCM format, so we'll try to convert that one. That would be our best.
If I can still, the PCM is this technology is moving so fast that I nearly threw away this PCM processor, and we played on a beta, and there was a processor and another thing, and plus the difficult thing is powering them, because they have these battery powered things that are probably all dead now, so we'll have to see.
Yeah. But Marilyn and I met in December of 84, and by 1987 we'd co-produced, or no, I should say 80, so it's 3 years. We'd co-produced CD, The Ritual of Civil Disobedience, Disarming the World, the play, Weaving, which was a small play for the Women's Project.
Oh yeah,
and
Katie
we'd gotten started on the Peace Camp Sing. So yeah,
we've got Katie's wonderful, Katie Van Doors I'm talking about now. We've got her wonderful laugh. What a marvelous laugh that woman had. A lot of the material from this apartment went south about 2 months ago. And that was a huge load with a commercial moving van. And now we thought we'd have just a little bit left. We're going to have another 16-foot truck. I mean, the amount of materials of different projects that we have here, it's not just that we're pack rats. We lived here, 2 individuals with 2 businesses, and the businesses generate a lot of clutter.
One other thing I'd like to say about the music making and peace camps or peace activism of women in the 80s was that music was such a powerful part of it all. The actions at the gate at Seneca, the marches here in New York were always accompanied by music. and or chant, sort of chant music, and that was very encouraging, inspiring. Gave women support. And
a way to participate.
A way to participate. And the evenings, every evening at the Peace Camp, it was music. It was a wonderful way of communing. And so I'm so glad that some of that musical document has survived, because I don't hear that anymore among women. I hear a very different kind of music making. It's partly because women are not united in that way. They're united for other kinds of things. But when we were videotaping at the gate or videotaping within the encampment, I found women very willing. We just tried not to interrupt meetings or proceedings.
Or rituals. Well, it depended. One thing that I guess I was naive, but when we were recording at the gate, and there were a number of people from the town absolutely in complete accord with the procedures in the camp, and their families or husbands or nephews worked at the camp. That's where the source of income was, and told the demonstrators that they were wrong, and they knew that the demonstrators were not wrong. They knew these figures and facts about the cancer rate. They knew that the people in the camp, the families of the commanders who had been there a long time, were becoming ill.
That's a whole nother issue. That one of the demonstrators who was on the film was the daughter of a former commandant of the camp, and she is the one who she had researched heavily because there had been so much cancer in her family. We didn't know it was a burying ground for poisonous materials till she told us. That was a whole nother side issue from the missiles and so on.
The women and other people who were on the other side of the fence hated it, that they were going to be documented, really hated it. And actually, I think if they had felt that they could get away with trashing our equipment, they would have done it. And
the hate was palpable.
Yes. And I couldn't, stupidly enough, I couldn't believe that they would, so I'm just turning my head, it's windy up here and we're getting a little side reactions. I couldn't believe that they would lie to themselves to that extent. But of course, this is the money. This is the salary coming in every week. But the other women, the women from the camp, practically always welcomed being recorded. As long as they knew it was going on and they felt that they could think about what they wanted to say. They didn't want a whole lot of candid remarks. They wanted to be aware that what they said was clear and thoughtful and what they meant.
I was up in '83 with audio, and then we went up for Hiroshima Day in '86, I think. 86, yeah, 86, and so we had a lot of footage there, and I just hope that the raw footage I saved. I hope I did. And it seems to me I was up one more time, but I can't remember. Then
went up twice, I think.
Then in 1987 or 88, I went up to Albany for a meeting at Michelle Crone's. I think it was her house. of women about what to do with the land and so on. And I think that was the last time that I met until you all came for Peace Camp Sing in the studio.
Until you came and sang.
Yeah, but the women were always coming into the city, and there was one major march that really, it was a very big march. And I was recording that. That must have been, maybe that was 84, 85. I'm not quite sure when that was. And I remember the police were very on edge, and I was going along beside, trying to get document, the drummers. We had fabulous drummers in these marches, and I remember the police were, get over there, you can't be out in the street, you have to be on the sidewalk, something. They weren't too bad, but a few women got hassled and hustled that day. Today, of course, we couldn't even do it. I think we'd all be in jail if we did what we did then. And that's what's so remarkable. When you compare now, it's not that long ago. 23 years ago, 24 years ago? The difference in the climate now, the things that various ones of us did would not be allowed. Homeland Security would clap us in jail, and the media wouldn't even be allowed to say anything about it. That's the scary part of where we are now.
The last few marches in the city were so ill-covered and were so organized by the police that protesters they protested around the UN. Protesters couldn't get within 5 blocks of the UN on any street if they were anti. Absolutely everybody got funneled into 1 or 2 or 3 blocks. And they didn't hassle you other than the fact that you could not move, you could not protest, you could not be covered by the media because the media was shooting in front of the UN. You weren't even seen. The fact that there were crowds up these side streets was not covered.
Well, the shift away from peace issues, the world changed. Europe changed, Russia changed, and the focus of the military changed. And a lot of what we were doing was really highly goal-oriented, and our efforts then shifted into the AIDS issue, and women's issues became diffuse. So both politically and socially, their health issues, women's efforts were no longer coordinated as a community, but as various committees. And then the creeping conservatism that has overcome us, creeping economic problems that have overcome us, no longer creeping, and then the use of the violence of 9/11 to trample on our civil rights. So it's been gradual. It's not one thing, but it's cumulative, and we have allowed it to happen, all of us, by not protesting, not saying this is wrong. This is not what we grew up believing America is about. This is not what we grew up. It's not what I grew up believing freedom is about. And the recent Supreme Court, California Supreme Court decision allowing gay marriage, for every bit of those steps forward in allowing a sexual freedom or freedoms of other kinds, we've had many of these steps backward. So it's a perpetual fight. And I think one of the biggest lessons from the early 80s that we women have to offer who were involved is that kind of ability to transcend some of the restrictions and say that's not right and we won't let it happen, and here's how we won't let it happen. And I think nonviolent action is still our most powerful tool.
And political actions. I mean, I am definitely for Hillary for president. There are many things that I don't like about her political stance, but mostly I like her tremendous involvement in women's issues and in health issues. And you were talking about how have things changed. I feel that, get a little airplane interference right now, I feel that women are not reacting politically to so many issues because they're fighting for money, they're fighting for health. Look at these new possibilities of having to pay 100% for some of your medications. I mean, that's going to wipe out this. You can pay more for a medication than you do for your apartment. I mean, I have some friends with MS. $10,000 a month. Now, this is ridiculous. It does not cost $10,000 to make a month of that medicine. I know it doesn't. And economically, I feel we're being ground down. There is a widening gulf between Bush's oil buddies, and even the upper of the middle class, all the way down to the poor class. There's just a tremendous gulf there. And we were talking to a woman who works for our dentist, and she has 3 children to put through college, and she's making enough money so she doesn't qualify for many of the college helps, and yet there is nowhere that she can afford $50,000 a year to send her child to school. And that's the first one. How about the rest of them? And it's the economics at this point. You know, we've slowly not been aware of it, but the economics are so strong to push us, destroy our focus on healthcare issues, women's rights. We're only looking at where's the next $10 for grocery money? Where's the next $20 for rent? And that's going to continue, and it's going to get worse. I have no quick thoughts or solutions on it. And the only thing I can think of is we've got to unite. And I don't even see women uniting to support a woman for president. I mean, many people don't like her, but I don't think anybody is that unhappy with her compared to a Bush. I mean, it seems like there's not a whole lot of reasoned thinking going on.
You know, down south I bought this land where we'll be living in 1981, when land was dirt cheap down there. Nobody wanted land, and I thought, well, I better get some land. And there was an outhouse, and I just gotten back from Germany, and I had this big sign to slap on wherever's a window or something. No. And I put it in the outhouse, no to nuclear waste. And every time I went into that outhouse, I saw that, and, you know, it reminded me of the humor that we had, as well as a very, Even
Yes,
today,
that's
we
right.
did. No. At that time, women in Georgia and South Carolina were protesting the Savannah River plant because of the nuclear material that was broadcast
Leaking.
and still is. And that was one of their big slogans too. We forget, of course, Seneca was such an organized movement for a time and heavily documented because we were here, New York. The Savannah River women who had an encampment are less known about, but they were focused in Atlanta, and I met some of them, and they were doing a very powerful. It was so uphill down there because economically, that plant provided thousands, if not tens of thousands, of jobs. If you look at the whole network. And it's probably still that way. I don't know. I haven't heard for a long time. But at that time, the bookstore, the women's bookstore in Atlanta, was a meeting place for the Peace Camp women. The way it used to be here in the 90s when the bookstore was here. And that's another thing, the decentralization of publishing industry. Women's bookstores functioned as our coffee houses for a long time, and we don't have those central meeting places anymore.
Well, now we've got, I think, now people are on the web, and we've got blogs. And blogs are reaching many more people, but they're missing the energy of the one-to-one. You're feeding me energy, and I'm feeding you.
Yeah.
And the blogs are helpful, but I feel that, and I don't have any quick answers, we've got to learn how to use the web better.